Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Bartek Szymanski, and I'm your host today for the Across the Globe Film Festival podcast. Tonight's guests is the Bohemians Band, including Eric Milton, Eric Pubens, Luke Lutardo, and Perry Ladisor. Gentlemen, welcome to the show, or the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
What's up, man?
It's great to have you guys here. I think you guys are probably our first musical group that we've had here on the show, and importantly so, because I think you guys possess a very important position when it comes to an element of film, which is of course music. But I want to start off talking a little bit about you and how you got started and where you are currently. So I read your bio, and then I saw that all of you grew up in Long Island. Did you guys grow up in the same city, same hometown?
Yeah, we all went to the same high school.
Oh wow, okay, and you're still keeping it strong.
Yep, yeah, still keeping it strong.
No one's going solo.
No one's going solo yet.
No one's breaking away from the band.
Well, one of the things I think that's actually like a really good thing, because I remember when John had initially reached out to us about this, was talking about like stuff to say to indie artists and like people who are just starting to come up about like what's a good piece of advice or like anything important to keep in mind. And I think one of the things that we did early on that was really helpful for us, like not imploding, which is what happens with a lot of high school bands, is we always just kind of had an understanding that we could all just work on side projects like and do whatever we wanted, and not have like like you weren't working on the band thing, so like that's you're betraying the cause.
Gotcha.
A lot of artists, when you're first starting out in a band, like you do need to have a kind of sense of like everything does have to go to the side, but we always made it a point to make sure that like if Perry wanted to do some songwriting with like another group of people, like that was always allowed. For me, doing film music, like that was always allowed and encouraged. Eric makes like electronic instrumental jazz music, and we always loved that and wanted to encourage that. And Eric Pubens is an accountant, and of course we wanted to encourage having a good financial brain on the team.
I was wondering what you're gonna go with when you got to me.
Yeah, but no, so like anyway, not to go on too much of a tangent, but yeah, we started in high school and avoided imploding by treating it like a healthy relationship where you have other things that you are allowed to do other than the thing itself.
Gotcha. And did you guys get your start in high school? I mean, did you start performing in high school, or was it more of a friend group thing?
Yeah, we all started in like different bands, like coming up, like Luke and Emil were childhood friends and came up on like a band they had together, and Pubens was in a band and I was also in another band, and then eventually it whittled down to these three playing a lot, and then I came in, and then that's how we all formed together.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Well, I want to ask a little bit about a little more about that, because my interpretation of starting a band in high school is left to the movies, where in the 80s you start taking over the garage and all this type of stuff. But I personally have no experience with instruments or music. I mean, the most I ever did was try my way with a penny whistle, which didn't go very far.
That counts.
So how does it look, or how did it look in the in today's era? Is it still sort of the same concept where you meet up in somebody's garage and just jam it out, or
No, it's definitely not. And I think a big part of like why that has changed, obviously COVID has exacerbated that a lot, but I think that changed with like we never really had that, honestly. Like we weren't really a huge like garage jam band that like would that was a very short period of time where we had the free time to be able to do that, where we could actually get together in the same room. So like a big part of our existence, because we went to college and we all went to college and still maintained doing the band, so like a big part of what we did was kind of transition our like high school kind of playing together jamming vibe into more of like a production team setup. And essentially what that then entailed was like the album that we've been working on for the last couple of years. We had to write pretty much apart from each other, because whether I was in school in Boston or Eric was working or something like that, like we always had to just figure out a way to make the time work. But it was very rare that we could get 4 people together in the same room. So a lot of what we wound up doing probably resembles more what people would associate with like hip hop production, which is actually kind of how we started off initially, making hip hop beats for like artists around our local area. But basically once we kind of realized that formula worked really well for us, and we were able to kind of continue our like songwriting scheme that way, we pretty much have just kind of embraced that, and only now are just coming back to like being together now that we're out of school and kind of have a little bit more control over our schedules. We're only now just getting back to like really jamming together and kind of being in the 4-person space. So in a long-winded way to answer your question, yeah, I think the landscape has really changed, but for the better. It's allowed us to basically continue doing like what would have otherwise been a garage band that maybe, you know, on the weekends we could come home and jam for a little bit, maybe play a show and then leave. Whereas like in reality, yes, we would come home for a couple of weekends, play a show and then leave, but then we would still be able to work, you know, the next day. We'd still be able to send each other demos, work on songs. We're all pretty fluent in Pro Tools and like digital audio production software. So yeah, I think that the process by which people seem to like get together into like a musical group nowadays is definitely more reliant on the internet, just because it gives you so much more flexibility. So you don't need to start and doing it in a garage. I mean, if you're around and you have the friends around and you can do it, you should. It's great. It's fun. But I mean, like Brockhampton, for example, like one of the biggest acts out, you know, in the last couple of years, like they all met on a Kanye West forum and they never met in real life until I think after some of their music had come out.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's more of the landscape that we're kind of dealing with now, it seems.
Yeah, well, that's great, and I think it's really cool that you guys are able to find a balance with that, especially now with COVID going on and everything like that. I wanted to jump a little bit, Keaton. I listened to some of your songs, and then I read a little bit about you, and I wanted to ask, what's the definition of ethereal soundscapes that you guys blend into your songwriting? I was curious.
Is that from our Spotify bio? Is that where you read that?
It's on your website bio. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I actually asked a friend of mine to offer his words, because it's like weird, you know, when someone asks like how to this is a problem we run into all the time, is like someone asks like how to describe our genre, and you know, it's not like we're making crazy experimental music or anything, but just again over time, like so many more artists have been opened up to new genres of music and including new sounds in their style. So like for us, we just like casually refer to ourselves as like dumpster jazz, and that's the name of our like big playlist that we have on our profile too. And the reasoning behind it is basically just, you know, like imagine any record in a dumpster, you just pull out and mix them all together, mix the sounds. And it's kind of a joking way of describing it, but
yeah, it's way better than saying like, oh, we're a little bit of like indie, dance, rock, pop, folk,
exactly,
jazz, like, you know, like
yeah, absolutely. And you guys said you guys created beats for hip hop artists. I wanted to ask a little bit about that. I might ask some rudimentary questions, or rudimentary for you guys, but some of our listeners may not know so much about what it is that you do. So I was just curious, how does one create beats, or, you know, create beats for hip hop artists? Is there a method to it, or a certain art?
Well, for sure, I know. That especially me and Luke, like getting our feet wet with music production in the beginning. It's kind of funny that we sort of started off there and, you know, ended up collaboratively as an alternative act, obviously. But yeah, you know, I think a lot in the beginning had to do with like sort of just combing through influences, sort of like what we were talking about with the just finding albums and stuff. I learned a lot with sampling in the beginning, and, you know, it taught me a lot because I always came up thinking about songwriting and song structure.
And what's sampling, just so we all know?
Oh yeah, of course. Like taking like a snippet from any kind of record, any kind of, you know, production sort of toolkits that they have on programs or anything of that nature, something that is, you're taking it, sort of using a piece of it and then turning it into something new.
Even like film scores, like a lot of rap, like Kanye, I think, and a lot of other rappers are really famous for like sampling old TV shows, sampling old phone calls.
Oh, I see. Okay.
1,000 things that come into my head, but the one you probably know is on that Kendrick record, Damn. Like the intro track has a sample of like a pop.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the idea.
And I don't want to go into a rabbit hole with this, but is this like a whole copyright thing, or is it?
That totally is part of that whole world. You know, of course, there's different ways of going about it. There's different levels of which you can sample something to where it becomes more of a proprietary thing. But yeah, there's definitely, you know, you're going to run into some issues if you just take the bass line from a Queen song and turn
like Ice Baby, like Vanilla Ice.
Your own empire without trying to give them any credit. But a big thing I would emphasize with sampling, and to that exact point, is that it's not something I would say that people should necessarily stray away from for that reason experimentally, just because of the things you can learn about music and what your ears hear in a piece of music. And you can sort of go back and study, well, why was I drawn to this sample? And then look at how that section plays out in that song and the puzzle piece that it is in that arrangement.
Yeah.
So it can even turn into a self-study of what do I like in music and what do I want to create.
Like there's a lot of, in hip hop they'll use a lot of jazz samples, so you could, like, if you dig deep enough, find the source of that sample and listen back to the original recording and find like a whole new bag of sorts of like music that you get into.
And I saw that you guys were really inspired by the 70s and 80s and that era in general.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Is that where you got your name, the Bohemians? Has it anything to do with Queen?
No, nothing to do with Queen. We actually got it from like way back in the day when me and Eric Milton were just kind of coming off of like the first band that we had been in high school. We were just kind of like toying with the idea of like forming a new band, trying to get more people on. And at the time, and still to this day, like we've always been interested in like religion and like the implications of like organized kind of worship and like that whole thing. So it's like whether it be cults or like fringe like religious things, or even like multi-level marketing companies or whatever, we're always interested in reading about like the history behind those things, because it's
fascinating. Really?
Yeah. And that's just a personal thing. That has really nothing to do with music. We just happen to be into that. And I think all of us find it interesting.
It was kind of a way of poking fun.
And it is, yeah, exactly. Well, it's at just kind of crazy.
So you're not trying to hypnotize people with your music into a cult or have any.
Oh, we are. No. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No problem about that. But
hey, cut that out.
Sorry, no can do.
But yeah, so basically it derives from a kind of cult-like
the millionaire playboy
club. Like an Illuminati-esque kind of offshoot called the Bohemian Grove that exists.
They meet out in the redwoods
in California
and discuss major affairs in the world. It is a real thing, but again, like I said,
right.
Just poking fun. Kind of, we thought it would be funny to sort of incorporate that name, and of course with the double entendre of like what a bohemian person actually is, and like so we just thought once we hatched that egg, we were like, yeah, you know what, let's go with that.
Yeah, and it was we started out with like the Bohemian Grove, then we shortened it to the Bohemians, and then we took the out, because I think I don't know if this is the only reason, but I remember it was right around that time the movie The Social Network came out.
Drop the
and they like dropped the it sounds cleaner. That was like the joke of that year. Like anytime someone said the something, so we were just like, yeah, drop the it's cleaner, and it was. So here we are.
Awesome. And you guys are also inspired by dance-driven indie bands. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh yeah,
I think that's just like what we grew up. That was like kind of our bread and butter growing up. That's kind of Daft Punk certainly. Yeah, R.I.P. But just bands like The Killers, like that was a huge influence for me and for all of us growing up. Like all of us, and pretty like everyone who grew up at that time period, like loved that album for the most part. And I think the whole offshoot of like dance-driven like indie bands that came after that, like Franz Ferdinand, The Bravery, which was like kind of contemporaneous with The Killers.
Definitely
Two Door Cinema Club, MGMT, early Walk the Moon. I was a huge fan of theirs, like really early on, because I saw them open for that band Fits and the Tantrums, which has now become like a pop band, but they were like a soul band at first. And then Walk the Moon opened for them. So like that whole scene of people, if you look up any of those artists, any of their related artists, is like what we all kind of grew up like intermingling with.
Shout out to Neon Indian.
Hell yeah. Neon Indian is a big shout. But yeah, that's the dance-driven indie band side for the most part. And that was like occupied most of our growing up, because again, that was our high school, which was the beginning part of our kind of time in the music world. So
do you guys play live? I mean, maybe not currently, but have you?
Not as much right now. Over the course of the pandemic, we did some more like live stream shows. So like some of them are on our Instagram still, where we just basically would do like a kind of condensed version of a show with some banter, and like I would call Perry on and he would sing some songs and we would talk, and so that was fun, and that held us out through the COVID times for the most part. But we're definitely looking to get back on stage. It's a huge part of our like whole purpose like for doing this basically is like is the live shows, like a huge extent of it. And to not do it is really rough. And also, just to be frank, it is the moneymaker of the music industry for any artist, any band. It's, you know, it's not in recorded music anymore, because recorded music anymore is not typically sold outside of vinyl and whatnot. So yeah, the live show stuff is really essential, and it does need to come back, you know, as soon as it's safe, but we do need as much support as we can, like all artists at this time, for sure.
We've been getting together to like jam just for fun, to like keep our chops up, like maybe explore different territories of like writing and stuff. So in that respect, I guess we're playing live for the crickets.
Yeah.
We're getting closer now to a garage band.
Good point.
Than sometimes was really the case in the first place. So that's been fun to sort of like, in a weird way of saying it, to get back to our roots with that, of just like, you know, we're not here to practice something specific. We're not here to work out a specific part for anything.
Whatever happens.
We're just here for what happens. And like, I guess that's the silver lining we can credit to our whole situation. The whole COVID situation is just
well, at least the crickets can produce some kind of a beat, you know. Start playing and
if you listen closely enough, you'll know what temperature it is.
Does it excite you guys, as you know, coming from, you know, whenever you're on stage, when you see especially to the type of music that you guys produce and make and play, does it excite you when you see people dancing, or, you know, does it take a turn? And
absolutely. Of course. When they dance, I start to dance a little more, and then when I start to dance, everyone else starts to dance. Steven starts to like,
it really is
wiggle a little bit.
It's always a reciprocal situation with the crowd, for sure.
Yeah. You know. But we do write, I mean, the music very much, you know, whether it's our early music that's out now or the music that we've been working on, we definitely write it in mind to have rhythm and to groove to. And I think that's like a big part of what we seek to like bring to the genre, like, you know, what we hope to like, not even just the genre, but what we hope to bring in general is like the kind of fusion of being able to dance along to it and also like listen to it in headphones and vibe out and enjoy it, and like music that's kind of sit for all tastes but is perfect in each respect. Like that's kind of the goal, right? I guess, is like to have it be able to, you know, in your darkest moment, you could put it on the headphones and it would still resonate, but you could also be like in a bar and someone turns it on, you're just like, oh shit, we can dance to this. That's kind of been our whole thing.
I know,
always.
like me and you talk about sometimes, and just all of us, like, as being so involved in the process, like you definitely can get jaded to your own music. But I know we've taken solace in the fact over the years of like, if nothing else, you can nod your head to this music and you can feel that. You know what I mean?
Sure, for sure.
That's cool. All right, so let's get into film, and how you guys make your music when it comes to film. How did you get started? Did you guys ever have that in the back of your head, or did it just sort of come about?
Yeah, so just to clarify real quick, so I'm the only one who does the film scoring stuff, and that does exist separately from the band. But what I can say is that the rest of us do definitely love cinema and have been listening and paying attention to film scores for like our whole lives. Like me and Eric talk about it all the time, like different scores that we like, different pieces of music in movies that have moved us and whatnot. So for like me personally, it was kind of like a long time coming. I always loved watching movies and like
Daddy Zimmer.
Daddy Zimmer. Well, I took that Hans Zimmer masterclass that they offer online. That's like learn how to do film scoring basically. And that was the first time I did, because the first guy who wanted to work with me was our friend Marcus. And he was basically like, hey, I need a piano score for this like 10-minute short film. It's going to be silent. There's no dialogue. I just want piano. And at that time, you know, like they had known me as a piano player. Like we have piano like features pretty heavily in a lot of our songs. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So that was like my beginning into doing film scoring. And then from that point on, I was just like, yeah, well, I love movies and like I love music. So like, why don't I find the crossover? And then when I went back and started to watch like the great movies have like the all-time great film scores, like Chinatown, you know, what Inception is a more recent one. Even like that Ocean's 11 movie has an incredible like jazzy kind of salsa score. You remember that one with George Clooney and everything?
Yeah,
that has a great score. But so I just started to go back and watch movies that like I thought were great that I had watched before, but that people had, you know, specifically marked out the score. And when you go back and like listen or watch a movie with like the score in mind, you can really tell how much work it's doing. And as I got further into the process, started working with more people and would get films that have no music on them. When you're watching people just raw acting with no music, you really know who's good and who's bad. And you can really tell, when the writing is shoddy and it's not there, because like you just don't know as a casual viewer of films, like how big of a deal the music is and how much emotional legwork gets done just with like a couple violins and stuff. So yeah, to answer your question, like, yeah, definitely like all of our experiences in music, like kind of added up to make me feel like confident enough to go and do that. And
yeah. Luke, can you produce music for my self-tape auditions when I send them in? I think they would do a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm not cheap, but no, I'm kidding. Yeah, man, but no, like, and I'd say for anyone watching like this or anything, like, I think all of us are pretty like approachable people, and we're all artists, just like working artists, like trying to basically like live our lives. So if anyone is like interested in like getting in touch with me about film music, getting in touch with him about like production for like hip hop instrumentals, I do that as well. Getting in touch with Perry about like songwriting stuff, like what Eric about accounting stuff, yeah, about tax returns.
Oh, this is his season. This is the season for the.
It is. Tis the season to be jolly.
but I do say like
it's the most.
But like, yeah, I mean,
in the shower
anyone who needs music for their reel, please don't hesitate to reach out, because we need the work.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll give you a little bit more space to sell yourself before we start giving out context and all of that.
Sure.
But I was curious because, you know, it when you see the end product, it's, you know, the music always seems to fit, or at least most of the time. But when you create the music, obviously, you usually create it in, I assume, in post-production, or sometimes it's also in pre-production. I mean, do you know how the scene is going to look like, how long it is, you know, when the certain beats come in coordinates with how the scene is going?
I think film scoring and music in films is something that can appear to people who don't know either anything about music or really anything about films as like this kind of magical, like, vomit that like you just put onto the thing, and it's whatever you come up with and it just lays on nicely. But it very much is structured. There are rules that, you know, if they're not constant rules that you already know ahead of time, there are rules that your director will set out for you. And there are like rules that you're going to want to build for yourself. Like, for example, like in a lot of the films that I do, I try to set like a general constraint on like how many instruments I'll use for certain things. It's something we do in our songs too. We try to do the most with less. That's like our personal philosophy. So like we try to only add things that they really are adding more in a substantial way to the piece. And I view film scoring that same way. So like that's one constraint that I have. But there are other people who don't look at it like that at all, and are equally valid in doing so. So yeah, there's no hard rules necessarily, but the rules that you impose upon it are really important. There's so many different ways to approach it. I've had people that have gotten in touch with me like with only a script, and then we start talking and ideas just flow naturally. And like, I do like to have as much time as possible. And it's the same thing with us when we're writing songs, is like giving creative people the most time that they can have to work on something is good. Now, you don't want someone to just be like, give them a deadline and then they don't work on it until 2 weeks before, because then that's pointless. But for me, like, if someone brings me on and they haven't even shot the film, good. Because I just want to read the script. I want to know what their like pure thought is of the film, and I want to start to get the ideas, you know, rolling on that regard. But often, a lot of times, it doesn't go that way. I mean, music is traditionally a post-production enterprise. So like, usually once the film is shot, it gets edited, picture locked, and then sent to me, and I do the whole thing. But I mean, it's very often that I'm working on assembly cuts for the first like month or so or whatever, just because I like it. I just want it. I just want to start like as soon as I'm brought on. So if they bring me on before it's actually finished being cut, I just say, send me an assembly, send me a, you know.
And what's an assembly?
An assembly cut is like just think of it as like a mock-up of all the footage that you've shot. And some directors do this different ways. Like some people just put the complete, you know, if you're really shooting on a tight shot list, you can just put all the shots in there and it's like not too crazy. Some directors will do like kind of small cuts and just kind of like roughly put it together. But it's basically just to give you, it's a demo of the movie. Think of it like that.
It's scratch.
Yeah, it's like a scratch draft of like what what the scene should generally look like, what shots are going to go where, you know, how the things are going to sound. And then, you know, you trim it down. Some scenes will be completely excised, some scenes will be expanded, whatever. But that's more or less what an assembly cut is.
Gotcha. That's cool. I mean, is it, do you, when you, well, I assume that, you know, you're very experienced in the field and so forth, but are you very particular about what kind of, you know, what kinds of movies or the genres, or can you really fit music in, you know, anywhere they ask?
That's a great question. And I think it actually does have a lot to do with music in general right now, and musicians in general. I think in the past, that was very much like a firm thing in the industry. From what I can imagine and see is like, if you wanted to do a big epic movie with a big adventure, you hire John Williams. That's the guy to do it. If you wanted to do like a kind of crime thriller or whatever, like back in the day, you would hire Bernard Herrmann. He's like really famous for working on Alfred Hitchcock movies and stuff like that. So like, I think there was a time when people really specialized, but as time has gone on and on and on, it's only expanded more and more to even to the point where like someone like Bernard Herrmann, who started out making like Hitchcockian like thriller scores in like the 50s and 60s, wound up making the music for Taxi Driver in the 70s. And that's like an all jazz score. And that was, at that time in film scoring, it was like not like jazz was not seen as like suitable music to be in the cinema for the most part. So even as early as the 70s, you're starting to see like composers who are well-versed enough and artists too, and bands and artists who are well-versed enough starting to expand out. But still at that point, like the industry around it was really constrained into doing like genre specific things. Whether you're in the music industry, whether you're in the film industry, music was very much seen as like you specialize in a particular style, you master that style, and then that's your style. Nowadays, especially in the last like 10 or so years, like our generation, our band, because music has been like, for all recorded music at least, has been like decommodified to a certain extent, where it's like super cheap and essentially free for most people to access every recorded piece of music ever made. The genre separation, there's no cost barrier to go and try out an experimental album from a genre that, you know, you would have never thought of. Like, I probably am not the first person who would have been interested in listening to like really heavy metal music, but like over the last couple of years, just in my own exploration, I found like really extreme acts that I actually like, but most of the acts in that genre don't appeal to me. So I think what we're starting to see now in both like the pop commercial music world that, you know, we as a band operated in the film music world is just a kind of like smorgasbord, take whatever influence you want from whomever, as long as you can bring it in and make the case for it, you know, within the context of the music or the film, then it works. And we see that that's actually like the demand, that people want that too. I mean, we see the success of, you know, we were just listening to an interview previously to this with Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak about their new song, Leave the Door Open, that we all really enjoyed a lot. And I think like that is just another way to demonstrate like people just want to hear good stuff. They don't necessarily care if it's like framed as a soul song or if it's framed as like some modern pop song. If it's good, and if it's assembled properly, like, you know, you're brought to that place organically and it's not feeling like you have to like force yourself to listen to this different style, as long as it's set up properly. I think everyone nowadays that I know listens to many different genres of music. Like I don't know a single person who only listens to rock anymore. I don't know a single person who only listens to hip hop, or I know a few like metalheads who only listen to metal and like some jazz people who only listen to jazz, but it's pretty few and far between. And most artists, not just music listeners, I have not met a single artist in my life, honestly. I think that only listens really consistently to one genre and only makes one genre. You know, artists among our age that we grew up with, like most of them, the people that we knew, our contemporaries, were like in bands. Then they were in like a hip hop production outfit. Then they were in like a jazz combo, and then like they were doing pop stuff. And then they, you know, so like that's kind of the state of affairs right now with most of music.
And then they created ethereal soundscapes.
And ethereal soundscapes, just like us, you know, if they're lucky.
So let me just, because I want to, you know, I don't want to chime in too much on this, but because, you know, we are going to have a lot of artists in the film festival who we don't even have yet, maybe, you know, let's say directors, producers who, let's say I'm the director or the producer, whatever it is. I have the script. I know every aspect. I know how I want to shoot it. I know the actors I want to cast, but I haven't really thought about music. I don't really know what to do. I'm kind of lost. So, you know, I approach you and, you know, I ask for your help. how does a meeting like that go? Do you read the script and you just get ideas of like, oh, what about, do you then produce some kinds of beats, or is it verbal ideas for me to sort of listen to? Would a meeting like that go exactly?
Yeah, I try to do as much legwork as possible before I show anybody anything. And if it sounds like I'm artificially tying this into like our band process, it's not. It's just because this is like the way that we've developed it over the course of the years. But what we always try to do is like bring whatever you're going to show to the farthest extent of completion that you want to bring it before you get other people's input. That's different for everything.
And I think it's important because, like you said, I think a lot of directors, don't have experience in this field. And even someone like myself, when I was in college and making an amateur short film, did not have music in mind, realized at the end that I needed music. And instead of approaching someone like you, I ended up using, some funeral music from royalty-free, sounds for a romantic scene, which, well, we're not going to get into that. But anyway, we are close to time, but there is one last question that we always ask our guests, which is your favorite film of all time. And I can even add in, I know this is on the spot, so you guys maybe didn't have a chance to think about it. You guys can name your favorite film of all time and maybe your favorite movie soundtrack of all time. It could be the same or it could be different.
Okay. Do you do that all time? I can go first and ramble.
Go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll go first and get it out of the way. I honestly, my favorite movie like changes from time to time for a variety of reasons, like most people do. It just like changes with how you feel. But a movie that I always come back to is Hot Fuzz. Hot Fuzz. Sorry, Hot Fuzz is the Killers album. Hot Fuzz is the Edgar Wright film with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and they play two police officers in this kind of like seemingly idyllic town, but like there's obviously something awry. And it's a comedy movie. It's like a dark comedy movie. But it's just one of those things that like if it's on, I just have to watch it. It just is so like it's paced so well. I feel like all of Edgar Wright's movies are like a masterclass in like editing and pacing and stuff like that. It just like once it starts, Baby Driver, same thing. Baby Driver could easily be on. I could easily be talking about that movie too because functions very similarly. But it's just like quick, but it doesn't exhaust you. It just keeps you like going forwards. And then the music, especially in Hot Fuzz, is like this kind of like intentionally over the top like action movie music, because the whole thing is kind of a satire on like buddy cop action movies. So the music, it's like takes itself like so seriously, and it just makes it heightens the whole experience even more, so the point that you're just like, when crazy things start to happen and it gets really accentuated by this like way too over the top action movie music as they're like running in the backyards of this like quaint English like countryside, it's just hysterical. And like that's a great example of like contrasting film music where it like is supporting what's going on, but it is like definitely acting against like what you're seeing, because like what you're seeing is like two kind of like bumbling cops. Well, the one guy is like a mega cop and the other guy is like a complete moron, so they kind of cancel each other out into being like average bumbling cops or whatever. And it follows them and just really blows them up with like this ridiculous score that just like keeps you really interested the whole time. So that's probably my fave.
Super.
Like Luke, mine sort of changes like again and again, like as far as favorite film goes. Lately though, I saw for the first time recently Boogie Nights, and like that just like totally like blew my mind. And I don't know why I slept on it for so long, but it maybe approached me like at the right time. And like it was cool how they like, use like the soundtrack of like those eras, like from the late 70s to the early 80s. Because the film I see is like all about like change, like it starts like, this guy's like getting recognized like in the porn industry or whatever. And I didn't know how I could think about that, but call it what it is. So he develops and then he spirals a little out of control, and that's as like the 80s are approaching, and then he tries to become a musician and tries to sing like the cheesy 80s ballads, and it's not working for him. So that like I like how the music is used in that,
Now, did they use like commercial music from the time, or is it a score?
I think,
because I think that movie just which is still cool.
Yeah,
that's just,
I think it was mostly just like the
that's cool
comment, like, you know, like the music like of like the time. I don't because I don't really like remember a score per se, except for like certain moments.
Yeah, that's a common technique. That's also really cool though. It's just like it's costly, but like that's another option too if you are not as interested in like hiring a film score. I don't know why I'm explaining like what you should do if you're not interested in hiring a film composer. Just hire a film composer. But if you don't want to, or if your movie like lends in a particular sense to like a specific time, and you see this with movies that are set in the 80s a lot, like where instead of having a score, you just do soundtracking, which is basically like, you know, you hire a music director and they just license out pop songs, like commercial pop songs of the time, and you just kind of thread those in throughout the movie. That's Baby Driver is like that. I don't even know if Baby Driver has its own score. I think it does actually. It has its
like
own score.
Some pockets.
Yeah, they do a cool thing where they, without going on a huge tangent, but they just like thread the pop songs and the score into itself. So that's a really cool thing that like that's for the real 1%. That's like that's like king shit when you get like your own score and then you get like pop music and then you like weave the two together. That's always really sick.
And going back to like the John Williams thing that you were talking about before, I was just thinking like the other day, like how like his music like in like he like, you know, scored like has like changed like or affected my life like in so many different ways. Even if I don't really know like the film, like I'll know like the music, you know what I mean? You know, Home Alone, he wrote the music for Home Alone. I had no idea, but like whenever I'd watch Home Alone, I'd be like, oh, like, you know, it captures the feeling so well. It makes me feel like, you know, all these emotions and stuff. Home Alone. It makes me feel, you know, alone at home. And no, but like that's just like I'm like, of course John. And I'm like, of course John Williams, you know, wrote that music because like he's just like a master of like capturing.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I don't think he was meant to write it. I think they they had a lot of trouble finding the right music, and I think he just went for it. And you know, it's sort of like Phil Collins with Tarzan kind of a thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and even just like musicians like Luke or Phil Collins who like transitioned
like me or Phil Collins, you know, just take your pick.
Like
take your pick.
Yeah.
Like, who like
do not gas him up like that.
Well, who God. Just like my point.
Really, I gave you a chance to sell yourself and you took it a bit too far, didn't you?
My point being musicians who like go into like film scoring, there is like a really interesting like aspect about that.
That is true, yeah.
You know, Phil Collins, the guy from David Elfman.
Danny
Elfman, yeah. You know,
of Oingo Boingo
of fame. Oingo Boingo fame. Yeah, like did Nightmare Before Christmas, did Spider-Man, like another like iconic score, you know.
You got a film for us, people?
I really hate to break the all the good talk about movies here and really insightful things.
No wrong answers.
I'm not,
except that one.
Except for the one you're about to hear. MGK's Downfall High. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, we were really about to have an issue.
No,
hold me back.
I don't watch a lot of movies. So my movie that I always go back to is like My Cousin Vinny. And
great movie.
Only because it's just my grandma reminds me of, rest in peace, of Danny DeVito and Joe Pesci combined.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she
really rest in peace.
She would kill me if I said that to her.
That's so funny.
But that's just one of those movies that like, I don't know, maybe it's just us being from New York, like just seeing a New York guy go down to like Georgia or wherever they were and just like not fit in at all.
Yeah. I think that movie also does have like one of those 80s kind of like Home Alone, like similar to Home Alone scores as well. I think so. I have to rewatch it to remember. I think you're right. But yeah.
And I don't have a lot of insight other than my grandma looks like Joe Pesci. But I think score though, kind of like going on with like the like using like I guess popular songs at the time. I think Ferris Bueller's Day Off did like
good shout.
A fantastic.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that.
Like I feel like you just jump to so many scenes when you hear certain songs.
Oh,
yeah.
That bass line has been in my head since we started this conversation.
Oh
yeah.
My God.
Yeah.
But I would say that those are probably my two that stand out.
Good shout.
That's the most insight I have.
What about you, Mr. Mill?
Yeah, well,
make up for what I just said.
I think like the most current one I would think of was probably Uncut Gems. Just speaking of ethereal soundscapes. I mean, forget it. Like there's like some sort of counterintuitive stuff in there where you have sort of these like fluttery and happy sort of sounds that are kind of layered over these chaotic moments that sort of are more of an internal approach, I think, sometimes to like how a situation feels more than how it might be outwardly, normally orchestrated, or experience per se. I love stuff like that, and like I said, especially just the way where it can catch you off guard so much, just for something to be like so beautiful and such a chaotic,
stressful.
Yeah.
Stressful's a fantastic word.
As opposed to where some composers would have had some like, bombastic sort of going on. They might choose to have something more low key and just just with the theme of that movie, it ties everything together of just like, you have this pulse that everything always goes back to, of like, just, always on the edge of your seat, and it helps keep that tension. But then again, like you were talking about the different approaches, like there's movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, or I was gonna say Napoleon Dynamite is one too, where just throughout the movie there's just sort of these musical moments. Some of it is original, like maybe Kip at the end of the movie. I love technology, but not as much as LaFonda. And then also like Canned Heat in there.
Yeah, that's it. I forgot about that.
You have like the '80s bangers in there too, and so yeah, I mean. I love
Napoleon Dynamite.
That's a good show. That's a really good show.
Yeah, some good stuff on there. Or even if you want to say like the Guardians of the Galaxy sort of approach of just kind of having it be part of the plot line. Exactly, sort of the jukebox of songs that you have going on in there.
I did have one more that came, the movie Soul that came out recently. That score is amazing because you got John Baptiste, right? That's how you say it?
John Baptiste.
Yeah. He like does all like the jazz like music in the movie and really captures like those feelings really well. And then you have Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross like filling in like the whole like the whole soul and ethereal soundscapes.
Yes. Let's go. Which Atticus Ross is pretty cool with that stuff. He's definitely. It was funny because I was watching the movie and I was thinking like, wow, like I feel like this is like some really like meditative, like making me have all these appropriately so all these existential feelings. Which one of the main times I remembered feeling that was the Book of Eli, which is also Atticus Ross having these kind of like divine frequencies. That's kind of like.
I love how every time you guys mention a movie title, there's a reaction from all of you.
Well, I mean, because that's the thing too. Like we grew up obviously in like a pretty small town. Like there wasn't too many places for us to really go or like do anything. So if we weren't just like walking around in the woods, like genuinely walking around in the woods, that is what we did for a lot of our time. We would like watch movies. We would like watch movies or play like these really cinematic video games. Like we always talk about the score for Halo 3 is like one of the best the best scores ever.
Nile Rodgers.
Is he? Oh, that's right. Well
he definitely plays in Halo 2. I don't know 100% if Halo 3 all the guitar work is him. But.
Yeah, well I know some of it in Halo 3. We're getting really into the weeds here, but some of the good. Anyone who played Halo will be interested to know Steve Vai, really famous guitar player, plays prominently in the Halo 2 soundtrack, and there's great videos online of him essentially seemingly being coached by Nile Rodgers into improving.
Nile Rodgers sort of came up with the like sort of little ideas and motifs that he worked into what he actually did. But
anyway. Super guys, thank you so much. Give us one more thing. Just give us your handles or websites, anything that you want everyone to know in case they want to listen to you or.
Yeah, I'll start with the Bohemians ones first. So for the band, we're at Bohemians Music everywhere. Bohemiansmusic.com has our website, and that has like all the links that you can use to go to like Spotify and Apple Music if you want, or you can just go and look it up. We're just Bohemians. Drop it.
Thanks, Justin Timberlake.
And honestly, our website is a good place to go. That has pretty much everything. It has our merch, and like when we start to do shows again, we'll put our dates up there. But yeah, Instagram too, at Bohemians Music. It's all pretty much under that one name. And then for me, doing film scoring, if anyone's interested in reaching out, whether to like talk about scoring or I also do beat production as well. So does Eric. you can hit me up. Luke1396@gmail.com is my email, or my website, lukelutardo.us. Just no caps, no spaces, lukelutardo.us.
Super, super. Guys, thank you again. And if you are looking for a beginner level penny whistler, I'm your guy. Okay.
Hell yeah.
All right.
We'll check it off the list.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Hey, man.
Peace out. Bye.
Peace out.